woke up in complete darkness, as if someone had turned off the entire world along with my sleep. A sudden sound broke the silence, a heavy, dull thud, as if someone was slowly and deliberately stepping across the attic floor, right above my head. My heart began to race. Reaching out blindly, I found the alarm clock on the nightstand. Its dim numbers glowed, 3 a.m. It was supposed to be quiet at night, but there was no silence. Slap. The footsteps continued, slow and heavy, like heartbeats. But it wasn't my pulse. It was something foreign, something alive and evil, right above my head. I sat up abruptly, threw off the blanket. The air in the room seemed thick and cold. The light from the clock illuminated only the edge of the bedside table. The rest of the room was plunged into shadow, which now seemed sinister and alive. My feet touched the floor. It was cold and sticky, as if covered with a thin film of something unknown. I left the room, afraid not just of the darkness, but of what might be hiding in it. The hallway was empty, but in the distance, the light in the attic was on. I didn't remember turning it on. My heart was pounding with fear, but my mind demanded an explanation. What was going on? In the storage room, I grabbed an old baseball bat, the one I had long forgotten, but now it was my only protection. I climbed the stairs to the attic. Every movement echoed in the empty house. Slowly, almost on tiptoe, I climbed upstairs. The attic greeted me with the smell of smoke and dampness, old dust and neglect. But there was no one there, just piles of junk, old boxes and cobwebs that trembled as if from the breath of the wind. I sighed, trying to convince myself that it was just a figment of my weary mind. Turning off the light, I hurried back, but as soon as I touched the railing, I heard it. Slap! It was closer, much closer. The sound was like a palm slapping the ceiling, hollow, threatening. I froze. Then I looked up. There it was, on the ceiling of my room, a body contorted into an inhuman pose, as if broken by the twisted hands of a nightmare artist. The face was turned away, but the empty eye sockets stared at me, black abysses that seemed alive and hungry. It slapped its palm again, now directly above me, and slowly slid across the ceiling like a shadow that had taken on flesh. My nerves couldn't take it. A panicked laugh escaped my throat, but it stopped immediately. The figure struck the light bulb, the only source of light. The bulb shattered, and the room was plunged into total darkness. Slap. 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 The sound of footsteps, now on the ceiling, echoed in my head. I realized that this wasn't a dream, and I was not alone. The darkness grew thicker, like a viscous fog creeping under my skin. I stood in the middle of the room, clutching the bat so tightly that my fingers turned white, trying to stifle my trembling. Slap. Slap. The sound of footsteps continued across the ceiling, slow and heavy, as if it were something alive and hungry. Suddenly, the room was filled with a cold that burned my skin like icy poison. A shiver ran through my body, as if death itself was flowing through my veins. I looked up and saw something sliding across the wall in the darkness, like a stream of dark slime, leaving behind a barely audible whisper. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel it was a call that burned my brain and pulled me down into the abyss where there was no salvation. Grabbing the bat, I rushed to the door, but immediately felt icy fingers clutching my ankle. I fell to the floor, my heart pounding so loudly that it felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. Heavy breathing, not mine, but close by, right behind me. "Go away," I managed to say through clenched teeth, trying to turn around. But the darkness was thickening, and I couldn't make out any silhouettes or faces. Smack. The sound was like a slap, only now it was on the back of my head. Cold pierced my brain like needles. My vision darkened, and I felt my body become heavy, as if made of lead. Then I heard a whisper, quiet but distinct, penetrating the depths of my consciousness. "You shouldn't have woken up. You shouldn't have seen." I tried to scream, but my voice gave out in the emptiness. My whole body was frozen in place. Suddenly, the light came on, bright and blinding. I blinked, and there stood the girl from the reception desk. Only her eyes. They were red, like the ghosts she had told me about. "You went where you shouldn't have," she whispered. "Now they're coming for you." Silence engulfed the room again, but I knew the night was just beginning. And this darkness wasn't just the absence of light. It was the beginning of the end. I couldn't believe my eyes. The girl from the reception desk was standing right in front of me, but her voice sounded as if it were coming from far away, from another world. Her scarlet eyes glowed in the darkness, piercing straight into my soul. "They're coming for you," she whispered, and I suddenly realized that these weren't just words, but a death sentence. At that moment, the door to the room slammed shut, and I was left alone, with a horror that would not let me go for a second. The lights went out, and I was once again in complete darkness. Now the footsteps on the ceiling were replaced by a quiet scraping sound, as if someone was scratching their fingernails against the plaster. My heart was pounding in my throat, and the blood froze in my veins. I tried to gather my strength and move toward the door, but something stirred in the corner of the room. Shadows thickened and turned into silhouettes. Faces without eyes, bodies in contorted poses, as if they had been broken and bent, leaving only their tortured shapes. They stared at me with soulless, empty eye sockets. The whispering grew louder, turning into the whispering of thousands of voices, merging into one unbearable wall of sound. "You disturbed the peace. You disturbed the peace." I grabbed the bat and took a step forward, but my feet seemed to be glued to the floor. The shadows were getting closer, and the cold air wrapped around me with every passing second, squeezing my chest tighter and tighter. Suddenly, a woman with white skin and bright red eyes emerged from the darkness, the one I had seen through the keyhole. She slowly reached out her hand to me, and at that moment, I felt my consciousness begin to slip away. With difficulty, I forced a cry out of myself and closed my eyes, hoping to wake up. And I woke up in my own bed, in the sunlight of morning. But my heart was still pounding wildly, and there was a cold mark on my palm. I knew it wasn't a dream. They were here, and they were waiting. The morning brought no relief. The room seemed different, alien. The air was thick and heavy, as if filled with silent screams. I tried to get out of bed, but my body was paralyzed by an invisible force. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a quiet but distinct sound. The jingle of keys slowly turning in the door lock. The door creaked and slowly opened. There he stood, the same ghost with white skin and blood-red eyes, but now his face was contorted into a hideous grimace of pain and malice. He stepped inside, and the darkness behind him engulfed the room, merging with my fears. I tried to scream, but my voice betrayed me and stuck in my throat. He approached me, and a cold whisper rang in my ears. "You shouldn't have looked. Now you're one of us." At that moment, the world around me became shaky. The walls began to bend and melt, and the ceiling dropped, as if trying to crush me. I tried to fight back with the bat, but it passed right through the figure. The ghost was immaterial. A terrifying laugh rang out from the darkness. Something inhuman, like the echo of 1,000 sufferings. The shapeless silhouettes flashed again in the corners of the room, surrounding me on all sides. As I tried to break free, I saw the door slowly closing, trapping me in a trap of eternal nightmare. I desperately tried to open it, but my hands slid across the smooth surface as if they were slipping through air. My eyes filled with tears of horror and helplessness as the final sentence rang out from the darkness. "You will stay here forever, with us." And at that moment, I knew there was no escape. My world had turned into an endless night, where an abyss lurked around every corner, and fear became my new reality. The darkness around me thickened like a living creature, slowly enveloping me from head to toe. The cold whisper in my ears grew into a hollow roar, as if the walls were screaming in pain. I struggled desperately, trying to break free from the invisible chains, but every attempt only deepened my despair. The ghost came so close that I could smell the rot and dampness. Its eyes, burning with scarlet flames, looked into my soul, sucking out the last shreds of hope. At that moment, I saw something terrible. Behind him were countless shadows, their faces contorted with eternal suffering, reaching out their cold hands toward me. I tried to scream, but my voice broke. Something inside me snapped, and the world around me flashed with a poisonous light, blinding me and tearing me apart. And then, suddenly, there was silence. I woke up in my bed, covered in cold sweat. The room was empty, and the morning sun shone softly through the curtains. But something had changed. On the wall, directly opposite me, there was a single handprint, white, as if burned by fire. I realized it wasn't a dream. The ghost will never leave me. And now, every time I look into the darkness, I feel it slapping against the ceiling, getting closer and closer, waiting for the moment to return.